In this lecture, we're going to focus on cost, specifically cost in manufacturing custom orders or small batches. For that type of situation, we will probably use, or our management will probably decide to use, job order costing. We'll first look at capturing the direct material used in the job. So as you may recall from the last lecture, what we're going to do is we're going to look at converting the raw material of needed in skateboards into the final skateboard that we plan to sell. Now you don't know the profitability of the skateboard until you figure out the cost of the skateboard that you manufactured. So to figure out the cost of the skateboard that you manufactured, you take the raw materials and then you run them through the process of manufacturing. And then while it's running through the process of manufacturing, when you're finally finished, you have the finished good. Once that good is sold, we can figure out the profitability. So first things first in our factory, the first schedule we have is called the production schedule. So it's basically just a list of jobs. You know, the salespeople, the marketing people have gone out and they've made sales. We now have to complete those jobs in the factory. Our company sells three different products. We sell the skateboard, we sell scooters, and we sell accessories like helmets. So as those jobs are promised, we need to put them on the production schedule so that we know, our managers know in the factory to be ready to make those. So as you see, we have 3 jobs that we need to complete in the factory. We have job 603, 604, and 605. So we have a batch of skateboards. We need 50 of those. Those are to be completed from February 2nd until February 6th. And then we have 50 scooters and then 125 helmets. And those are going to be completed between February 12th and February 15th. Now, these schedules are not the exact same at every business. As a matter of fact, every factory is going to have their own way of doing things, but this is just a typical thing you might see in order to organize the manufacturing process and give the managers their ability to do their job. So the first thing we want to do is create a system, use a schedule where we can track the costs for each of these jobs. Our first job being job 603. So let's look at a mechanism that we can use to track the job and the cost of going to job 603, and we'll clear off some of this other information to make it easier to follow. So the way we do that is we use what we call a job cost record, and the job cost record is going to have the direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead that's being applied to each job. So this is going to be for job 603, the 50 skateboards. And so what we want to do is we want to track the direct materials that go into these 50 skateboards. The direct materials, as you recall, are materials that are specifically in the skateboards. So it would be the wheels and the bearings and the decking and the labels and the axles. All those things that go specifically into the skateboards are direct materials. If it's used in the factory as a material, but it doesn't end up in the skateboard, like for example, if it's cleaning solvent for cleaning the factory floors, that is an indirect material. That's more of the manufacturing overhead side. What we want is just the stuff that we have in the skateboard as our direct materials. Later we'll look at direct labor, which is the people that specifically put the skateboards together. I call them hands-on people. And then we'll see how we can take all the costs that are associated with our factory that are not direct material and direct labor, and how we can carve out a chunk of those costs and assign it to this job of 50 skateboards in a way that makes sense. So as we're going through and doing this job, the materials, the labor, and the overhead that's all being used in this job, this is part of how we track our work in process. So this job cost record is going to be our work in process, and once it's finished, that'll become a finished good, and later on a cost of goods sold. But we're tracking the work in process as we go along with this job cost record. So when we look at the direct materials, the first thing we'll look at, the first schedule that's going to be helpful for us is called the bill of material. So the bill of material, think of it like a recipe card. It tells you how much you need of each of the parts to build the 50 skateboards or whatever job you're making. So this job is going to be 50 skateboards. So we need to get a job list, a parts list of all the things that we would need to make 50 skateboards, just like a recipe. So our recipe to make our 50 skateboards, we need decking, we need axles, and we need wheels. Now there may be more things that you need, like labels for the graphics and polyurethane and bearings and all that stuff, but we're just keeping it simple. So I'm just taking a few of the parts that we need. So you would probably need more than this, but just to keep it simple for us, these are the 3 parts that we're going to focus on. So to make it, we need 50 decks because there's 50 skateboards. You need 1 per skateboard, 2 axles per skateboard, and 4 wheels, obviously. So we'll start with that, and then the next thing we'll look at is getting the materials from the warehouse where all the raw materials are kept and move them over into the factory. So the schedule we'll use for that is called the material requisition. So this would be like the manager's job, maybe the manager of building these 50 skateboards. And he or she then needs to tell the warehouse or tell the whoever's in charge of the logistics of moving the parts around to go ahead and grab these parts for me to put them into process. So there you go. So they would do that by using a material requisition, and you would have one of these for each job. So our managers in charge of this job go ahead and set up a material requisition. These are the 3 parts we're looking at and focusing on. We need 50 of the first part of the decks, 100 axles and 200 wheels. We have the cost for each and the total cost. So this now helps us to understand the costs that are going into the job from the direct material standpoint. So now that the workers in charge of moving the material around know, hey, this requisition is telling us to move parts around, what they'll do is they'll go ahead and get those parts and move them, and we'll use a direct material record to tell us how much inventory we have of these parts, and it'll also tell us, what's been used in the jobs and what's available for the next jobs. So each part is going to have its own raw material record, right? The raw material record is going to show you everything that's going on with that part. So in the past, this has already happened before our job 603. In the past, we received 100 deck boards, and we used 70 of them in previous jobs, and so what we have available now in the warehouse are 30. Now this is a problem because in order to do job 603, the requisition is asking for 50. That means we need an additional 20 at least. So usually what happens, or what's supposed to happen, is that the managers in charge of purchasing are going to see, hey, the bill of materials is out there, the requisition is going to come through soon. We know that the dates are February 2nd for the skateboards. So for that reason, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and order some more decks because we don't have enough. So we have 30 available. Let's generate a purchase order for some more. So a purchase order will be generated for 75 more decks from the supplier. Why did we get 75 instead of 20? Well, usually you get more than you need than the exact amount, and that way you have some extra on inventory in case some things get damaged, or in case another order comes through, for those kinds of reasons. And how much extra inventory you get is really up to the management's discretion. So then when they go ahead and use up they get the 75 in, they go ahead and they use up 50 for the job. Now we have 55 left. Why do we have 55? 75 minus 50 is 25. Well, the reason is because we had 30 available, right? So we had 30 to start with. Then we received another 75 more received. And then we used 50. So that's why we have 55 available. Anyhow, you get the picture. So this raw material record is, again, everyone is going to have their own way of doing this, but this is just an example of what we would have. And we just, our factory needs some way of tracking this stuff, and so there would be some method used for that, to track that. So once this has happened, and once this material has been used, and now it's time for it to go into the job cost record. The job cost record is tracking all the materials, labor, and overhead that is applied to this job. Well, at this point, what we've done is we've taken the decks and moved them into the job. So that's all that we've seen happen so far. Other things are probably happening, but this is all that we've seen. And because of that, it's moving into the job cost record, and we're able to track the materials as they get put into the job. If the other parts get brought in, we would also add those into the job as they get put into the factory, onto the factory floor where the skateboards would be put into production, where they are being built. So the flow so far for direct materials for our job is, we get the production schedule, we get the plan, and then we go to the bill of materials. Then that bill of materials lets the managers know what they need, and then the material records is the managers that are actually part of the building process, asking that materials get pulled from the warehouse into the factory onto the floor. And then once those materials are pulled into the factory onto the factory floor, now they're in the process of being, building the skateboards. Now we need to put that in the job cost record so that we know the materials that we've used. So that's an idea of the direct material flow when tracking it. We also need to look at direct labor and manufacturing overhead.